Anybody who picks up a gun, anybody who fires a missile must realize that the law is alive and not in slumber, and that accountability is absolutely essential.
That was the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court speaking to Russian leaders and every Russian soldier on the battlefield in Ukraine. A warning that no one should believe they can get away with a war crime. Moments later, the Russian foreign minister spoke, trying to undermine the ICC, accusing it of being a propaganda operation. Now, a warning to our viewers, some of the images you're about to see are disturbing. And here with me now is Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor for the International Criminal Court. Mr. Khan, thank you so much for joining me here today. The Russian foreign minister, not only in his remarks went after the ICC, he also continued to call the images coming out of Ukraine, the images of atrocities, fake. When he calls the atrocities in Bucha, and the way he said it yesterday was, quote, staged, how damaging is that kind of disinformation? Does it make your job harder?
No, the truth is the truth. Parties can make their own statements, but I've been to Bucha, I've been behind St. Andrew's Church. I saw those bodies in the body bags, and they were real people. So we have to investigate how did they die, if crimes were committed, and if so, who's responsible. And this is a forensic process, and in all conflicts there's counter-narratives and narratives, truth, disinformation mixed, and we have to separate it so we get distilled pure water from what could be, a variety of information.
What you're getting at is with this war, any war, there are politics involved. And what you cannot be involved with is that, even when you're attacked personally.
Absolutely. I mean, Churchill said a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth gets a chance to put its pants on. But the great thing of the judicial system, in the end, the truth will out.
You've been to Ukraine, I think you've said 3 times now.
Indeed.
This is the biggest deployment ever of ICC investigators. Of all of the destruction and brutality and suffering that you have seen as a prosecutor in general, what is the image, if there is one, that sticks with you most, at least so far, from Ukraine?
In fact, I can't say which one, because every location I go to, one is staggered, not only by the destruction and of buildings, of hospitals, of schools, but the fortitude and really the heroism of survivors, because they've got nothing. Either they're crossing the border with their plastic bags or they're separated from their loved ones, and they have this hope that a better dawn will come and that international institutions and the rule of law will bring some modicum of justice. And some areas we haven't set foot in. If we look at the panoply of information we receive, the allegations of crimes against children targeted in hospitals or allegations regarding schools being hit, these, of course, legally are a priority of me. And, of course, the harm that would cause if to those children is something that needs to be investigated. So many allegations of children being transferred into the Russian Federation territory. These are priorities. So all of those must focus our attention, and it can't simply be the people we have the privilege of seeing, but actually even more so the individuals that are unseen, but whose lives are in very precarious situations. And the law needs to be relevant to them. We need to protect those individuals who we don't see on our TV screens.
And that's actually something that you spoke to the Security Council about, was the forced deportations of Ukrainians, including children. And it's something that is deeply unsettling, some of these allegations that we've heard of. A State Department official in July actually estimated that about 1,000 Ukrainian children, and the way she put it, had been stolen and given to Russians, just kidnapped. That is a war crime. But is there any way to get these children back? I mean, do you believe that these children would be able to be brought home?
Well, that's an issue that I can't speak to at the moment. We know certain transfers are taking place. But at the end of the day, my focus is the bread and butter matters that have crimes being committed, and if so, who's responsible. That itself may act as a catalyst for consequential acts that states or the Russian Federation or Ukraine and others may wish to take. But clearly, if people are being torn from their families or are being transferred across international borders and they are being given up for adoption, this is an issue that could give rise to the jurisdiction of the court, and I'm certainly prioritizing the investigations in that respect.
It just seems particularly hard to follow that line, to follow some of these children are babies. Yeah. And that just seems particularly hard something to follow and track and investigate.
It is. I mean, conflict is ugly. Yeah. Conflict is awful. It's not illegal. But what is illegal is deliberately targeting the most vulnerable. It is a criminal offence to target a hospital or a school, or to target a child or a woman or a man, the elderly, any non-combatant. One doesn't have a licence to kill with impunity. This is why we have the laws, and these are the lessons of history of Nuremberg. And this tragedy is, as international community, we know that. All of your viewers will know never again, yes, that we've heard since the Holocaust. And yet we see, to our great chagrin, yet again, yet again, and yet again, these crimes are taking place. So this is the moment where I think we need to regalvanise our efforts and to show that the law can be active on the front lines. We're trying to act more nimbly. We're there in Ukraine. We're there in other locations around the world.
And you're there in the midst of war. I mean, typically war crimes investigations occur after a war. You are there in the middle of a war. You've said that, of course, presents challenges, but also opportunities. And I was interested, what are those opportunities?
Well, access to evidence before it is interfered with, yeah, before evidence is lost or destroyed. There are always allegations from the defence or from states that events may be staged. Well, if we're there at the time, as soon after that territories, for example, have been freed up, we can get the best evidence possible, and that's always of the greatest utility to judges.
Is there more the United States could do to help you in your efforts in Ukraine?
I think there's a lot that the US can do, and I think one of the issues that hopefully may get bipartisan support is some clarifications of the ASPA, the American Services Protection Act, because at the moment I can't interview a Ukrainian, for example, on the territory of the United States. It's illegal under the American Services Protection Act. So I think I had some meeting with some senators and the US administration. I think there are initiatives already underway to try to clarify the scope of the ASPA so we can work better and get some help from the United States and other countries as well. And I should say I've also written to the Russian Federation. I have written, even on this trip, to meet Foreign Minister Lavrov, so I will keep trying to engage with all parties.
Any response?
No response from the Russian Federation.
As you mentioned, again and again and again, these atrocities continue all over the world. One place in particular that I've followed very closely is the war in Syria. This month, the SDF, the Syrian Defense Forces, who are allied with the United States, they completed a huge raid in the Al-Hol refugee camp in northeastern Syria, and some 300 ISIS operatives were arrested, found hiding in the camp. But it has left me thinking there's really no way, or very limited way, to administer justice there when there's really no judicial system in Syria at the moment. Is there any space for the ICC in that kind of ungoverned space? Is there a space for the ICC to step in there?
I think it's a critical question. I mean, I was the first special advisor and head of the UN team investigating ISIS, and I was in Baghdad in Iraq for 3 years. And this issue of Al-Hol and the neighbouring location of Al-Hasaka is well known to represent a massive humanitarian but also legal and national security challenge. So I think there are things we can do. Already we have, as the court, jurisdiction in relation to the nationals of state parties. There are other options if Iraq, for example, wished to make a declaration to accept the jurisdiction of the court, like Ukraine did. We can also help and work with the Iraqis. And there's other mechanisms as well. The main thing that I'm convinced about, I'm a Muslim, and I used to go always to the Security Council and say that the Islamic State is the most un-Islamic state. And one of the utilities of the law is to put in a spotlight an ideology, to confront it and dissect it. And I think it's very important to show that killing individuals, denying people freedom of worship, are not only criminal offences in the context that we've looked into, but actually contravene the basic tenets of Islam.
I mean, just adding to the huge challenge ahead for you, but thank you so much for your work, and thank you so much for spending time with us today.
My great pleasure.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.